Imagine you and I would completely, totally, and truly understand what drives your users, and maybe even humanity at large. What drives Homo sapiens, this species on this very beautiful planet that's sort of all over the place? What determines their behavior? What is influencing their behavior? This is a question that sort of, if I would get a little bit of insight on that, that would be my primary goal in life. And that's because I'm a psychologist, and I'm probably the worst psychologist you will ever see, because both my parents are psychologists. I married one. More than half of my employees are psychologists, right? My only sister is a psychologist. So I tend to joke around that. If I meet my relatives and my employees, I ask them like, hey, how am I doing? But actually psychologists never ask. And I think that's important to remember. And I'm going to explain you why, in behavioral science, we're not very fond of asking questions. I'll get back to that later. What we do is rerun experiments, just like a lot of you are doing a lot of times, right? 1,000 experiments live on a daily basis, right? Which is even not that much if you look at Facebook, where 1,000 experiments are started every day. We are facing in CRO the biggest psychological experiment ever. Never has there been more research to what drives people. So I like to experiment, right, for my clients, but also on two specific persons on this planet that are most dearest to my heart. My kids. Anyone of you has kids? Can you raise your hand if you have kids? Please keep your hand raised if you know the marshmallow test. And then please keep your hand raised if you did the marshmallow test on your kids. Oh my God, I totally love you. So I did the experiment. And I'm going to show you what happens at my home. I have two boys. There are actually three kids in the video, right? So on the left-hand side is my oldest one, in the middle is my youngest one, and then there's a boy from the neighborhood. They are 11, 7, and 11. For those of you who do not know, the experiment is very simple. You give your child a marshmallow, and you tell the child you can either eat the marshmallow straight away, or you try to wait, and if you wait for long enough, like maximum of 15 minutes, and I tell you the experiment is finished, you get a double reward. 2 marshmallows, right? You get 1 extra, so there's sort of big bonus in there. And typically what happens at my place is the following. And I actually have this on video. So I start the experiment, right? They know the experiment. We've done it so many times. And I tell them, right, so we start right about now. And then I have to text my wife, he's still not passing the test, honey. We have work to do. Because why is this experiment? Why are we so fond of this experiment? Because there's no experiment that we have come across so far. I know, he's a nightmare. That is a better predictor of your child's future health, wealth, and happiness. Right? This is a test on delayed gratification, an experiment on self-control. Right? And the more self-control a human has, the better he is in resisting urges like drug abuse or financially stupid decisions, decisions that are impacting happiness on the long term. Self-control is an amazing thing that humans have, and that is not so prevalent among any other species. So self-control is a term that we easily use, but if you think about it, so what is controlling what, right? Is the self-controlled, or is the self-controlling something? I tell you, it's the latter. And that's why I so much love this experiment, to introduce you into the psychology of human behavior. We have in our minds, and I hope that by now most of you have heard of this before, because this is nothing new, right? This is 50, 60-year-old psychology, but there's more happening in your brain than you're consciously aware of. We nowadays, thanks to one of my gurus, Kahneman, call these two types of processes very boring, system 1 and system 2. We used to have way better terms a long time ago, but since he won the Nobel Prize for economics, we are all using system 1 and 2. Another psychologist, Richard Thaler, won another Nobel Prize for economics, again uses system 1 and 2. Ariely, all of them use system 1 and 2. Why 1 and 2? Because 1 was first evolutionary, if you believe in evolution, and system 2 only came very recently. But system 2 is what you would typically call your consciousness. It's this voice in your brain that's talking to you, that you're aware of, that you call I, right? That's the self. And that consciousness has something that is amazing, which is it can control your intuition, your automated, your unconscious brain processes to some extent. Now this system 1 and system 2 thinking, I think, is extremely important when we talk about conversions. When you talk about a user, my stomach goes a bit like, whoa. If you look at your Google Analytics, your unique users, I go, ooh, because it's not one thing you're looking at, right? The most basic thing to remember is we're at least looking at two things. We're at least looking at two systems. And I'm gonna show you a bit how we apply this later on. Just to make you aware of the fact that you have these two systems in your brain as well, I'm going to run a little experiment on you, always being experimenting. I'm actually going to do two because I promised another one as well. The first thing is, the thing that your consciousness does is, the thing that it's very good at is that it has a conscious memory of what happened before, right? Your memory. It can think logically about the current situation, and it can project future outcomes, which is an amazing power and is something that your unconscious brain processes are not able to do. So this power, the thing that it can do, it can only do one at a time. So in order to make sure that it can, make your genes reproduce, because that's one of the basic things that your brain tries to do, is it will automate everything new. If there's something that's very good on this planet in automating, it's our brain. Every new behavior we approach with our consciousness, but as soon as possible we try to automate it so that we can devote our mental energy to new situations. Here comes the experiment. It's very simple. I just landed at the airport. I saw a family passing by. There was a father, a dad, and there were two children. I saw that one of the kids was a boy. I don't remember exactly which one, but I'm asking you, what's the chance of their other kid being a boy too? Right? And if you follow my course, because I saw a bunch of you out there, don't answer this question. Most of you, now let me ask it otherwise. Whom of you thinks the answer is 1/3? So we have two people in the audience with the right answer, and one of them is my business partner, Tom. You. So I'm totally in love with you. This guy should be hired at booking.com if you're looking for people. We're also looking for people. The answer is very simple, folks. First of all, the answer that you gave, which was probably 50%, is the automated answer. But it's an automated answer to another question, which is just boy-girl, right? Or if I would ask you, if I saw that the oldest one was a boy, how big is the chance that the youngest one is a boy too? But it's different. It's not the question I asked. The question I asked had 4 possibilities. When people get children, they either get a boy first and a boy second, or a boy first and a girl second. The other way around, first a girl, then a boy, or 2 girls, right? Those are all the options out there. One of those options cannot be, because I told you at least one of them is a boy. So we have 3 options left. 2 of those options involve a girl, right? Only 1 out of 3 is another boy. So the answers you give are very often unconscious, automated, system 1, as we call them, answers. And this is why we hate asking questions in behavioral science. We're not fond of user research. User research can tell you a bit about the conscious part of the brain. It will never ever tell you anything about the unconscious part of the brain, which tend to be very important. And it will mainly provide you with alibis, post-decision rationalizations, as we call them very awkwardly. I have one, no, I'm going to do the other experiment if I have time enough. But I'm going to pass on. So system 1 and system 2, I hope you're a bit with me. And because I want to tell you more about how we apply this knowledge. The first you should do, if you realize that you only have a voice in your brain that is thinking it knows why you behave the way you do, and it thinks it knows why your users behave the way they do, is to accept that you don't. So basically, the first way to apply psychological insights, behavioral scientific insights, is not to, but at least accept that your brain will be a very bad optimizer because it can only think consciously. When we get a new client that we're trying to grow their company and get more earnings and more learnings and delight users more, the first thing we do, we enter, we see all these people talking, and we go like, ooh, those are system 2s in their heads talking to each other, having opinions, right? Like opinions, folks, like Pep Lye says, are like assholes. Everyone's got one, right? And he says something else as well. I'm not going to say that. The thing is that all this talking takes time and therefore money. In the same time, you might have run an experiment. And that's what we call the transactional level of applying psychology, behavioral science. We're first not going to apply it. What we're going to do is we're going to create an experimenting factory. It's just operational excellence. It's creating a platform where the experimentation is facilitated in all ways, and we're going to try to get the costs of every experiment down, run more and more and more, because then we will find true winners. We don't know why. We had no idea would be a winner, but you will find out that very often you wouldn't have done any better would you have given it more thought. It's very simple. If you start realizing that if you want to double your growth by running experiments, what do? Are you going to double the experiments, or are you going to double the value per experiment, the quality? This is not a hard calculation. I've never come across a client of ours that was able to double the average value, the average uplift, right? Or to double the winner ratio very easily. It's very easy to double the number of experiments. So the first thing is what we call quantity over quality. This assumes, though, one thing, and it was mentioned by Max in the previous talk: qualitative data. And folks, 9 out of 10 companies that we enter, the data is corrupt. And the experiments, and especially the statistics, are applied on assumptions that are not met. Very easy one, I know you all are aware of it, but no one is calculating with it, is what in science is called sample dilution, but I tend to call it the ABBA effect. We're here on a mobile conference, people switch device, we don't recognize them, we randomly assign them to the experiment again, and guess what? We're not A/B testing. We're A, where people see the default variation, part of them. We have a group that sees B, right, the treatment condition. And guess what? There's a huge group, which we call the ABBA group, that sees both A and B. If you don't know the size of this group, folks, then all your power and significance calculations are actually rubbish. I'm going to show you a client as a case in a few minutes, where more than 50% of the people on the homepage will see both variations, because these are millennials, they use a hell of a lot of devices, within a week. Right? So half of the group will have seen both variations. And it's not, the statistics are not that difficult, but at least you have to incorporate them. So it starts with good data, and then it needs craftsmanship, right? You need to be a good statistician, or at least have a good statistician on the team, and a good experimental designer. We're going to make sure that this craftsmanship is okay. Then the experiments are going to run, all based on earnings. Why? Because in the end, we need the board to be convinced of an experiment-driven culture. And their language, at first, is about business cases, ROI, money earned, etc. And the primary goal that we have when we help clients to get to the next level is to make them rethink about experimentation, not in terms of gains. Right? Stop talking about, we uplifted this, because they will see it as an extra. We have to reframe it and make them rethink in terms of losses. Right? At Booking.com, they call it regret. Every experiment that we statistically could have run, but didn't, is a loss. If you know the average value of an experiment, right? So you know let's say 1 out of 5 is a winner, is 10% uplift, so on average 2% per experiment. You know the value of that. Every experiment not run is a 2% loss. And guess what? In behavioral science, we know that losses are way more powerful than gains, especially if they involve money, the loss of money, especially if they involve the loss of money in board level. So you have to make them rethink, like every experiment that I could have run statistically, but you didn't allow me to because IT was delaying, blah, 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 made this huge loss. And for us, this is one of the ammunitions that we use to convince board level that we should experiment more. Enough on the transactional level. One thing, it's mentioned a few times, but it can't be mentioned enough. This is all about power level. So those of you who are not sure about what power was again, dig it up. Power is way more important significance. You don't care about false positives, you care about false negatives, right? If you have a good idea, you want the experiment to show that it's a winner. That's all you're into. If you put something live, that's a false positive, so who cares, right? It's not growing revenue. No, but you're not making a loss either. If you have a very good idea that's actually going to bring you a lot more revenue, but the experiment will tell you it's inconclusive, that's where you're losing money. So it's all about the power. Transactional, right? That's it. Now we're getting to the stage where we're actually running a lot of experiments, and doubling the number of experiments is no longer very easy. What's the next thing we can do? Yeah, we can start looking at if we can increase the value per experiment. Can we create a higher winner percentage? Can we increase the average uplift per experiment? And this is where intelligence comes, right? Where your knowledge on the user comes in, and therefore behavioral science and your own experiments. And then in the end, you want to have such a huge understanding that you can actually start driving new business ideas, disruptive ideas, innovative ideas. Because that's, again, the language that board level is talking about. Everything is changing so fast. Right? We need to be very disruptive. Very cool. We're gonna be very adaptive by running all these experiments, but we're also gonna learn from it in order to be disruptive as well. It's both earn and learn. To some extent, more details with a beer later on. So I'm gonna focus now in my last 10 minutes on this part, how to apply these insights when you're trying to get better outcomes of your experiments. Talked about system 1 and system 2. What you want to do first is analyze which of the systems do I have on my platform. You know, which systems are completely, just clicking by intuition, following their automated system 1 responses. And which parts are actually in conscious control, trying to get something done, goal-driven, system 2. The issue is a bit that it depends a bit on the market, what are good indicators, but just to give you an initial idea, system 2 people tend to be the ideal people because they follow your funnel. You thought about a few steps, whatever, home search product checkout, and they do a home search product checkout because they're goal-directed, they know what they want. They tend to be a long-tail search, Someone is Googling for a Samsung X823 at Amazon, they know what they want, they're in conscious control. Time of the day is very important. Google Analytics made it more easy recently. Monday mornings, we get things done, we have to-do lists, right? People on a Monday morning tend to be more system 2 driven. Friday afternoons, we're commuting, we're clicking, we're drinking, we're having a very nice time, we're enjoying ourselves, which is very important in life, but we're not in conscious control of our behavior, typically. If you analyze which of the two systems is in control, right, or is system 2 in control, or are we only looking at system 1, then the next question, obviously, is which of the systems do I actually need? Which one is in favor of me? And then you get to this, what we call square. It's very ugly with this. But we have 4 quadrants, right? Let's first focus on this one. People are in conscious control. They know what they want. They're goal-directed. And you want to keep them in that state. Usually you want to keep them in the same state. It's all about ability and motivation. Doesn't matter which behavioral scientific decision model you grab. Elaboration likelihood model, BJ Fox behavioral model, triad model, all of them, when they're thinking about goal-directed behavior, are talking about ability and motivation, which basically means you have to make it very easy and you have to keep them motivated for this end goal. I'll show you 2 examples in a bit. What could also happen is that people are actually goal-directed, right? But you want them to choose by intuition. And this might make you feel awkward because you're going to switch off their consciousness, right, and follow their instinctive unconscious processes. But you know what? People are usually better off using this system, system 1, especially when they're very complex decisions. At Booking.com, if you would rationally think about every opportunity of hotels with Christmas in Barcelona that has a twin bed, you would, including like the free cancellation, breakfast, whatever. There are so many options, you're never able to consciously think about the best option in that enormous amount of possibilities. So what we typically do is we switch off your consciousness by overloading you with persuasion tactics, by distracting you, making it a bit less easy to rationally compare. You will fall back and rely on your intuition, and you will actually choose a better, in this case, hotel, and you will actually end up more happy with your choice than when you would have thought about it rationally. That's that quadrant. Now people are on the train, on their mobile device. They just click a social ad, enter on your platform. This is where typically when people think about persuasion, the tactics used there, this is the quadrant where these apply, right? All sorts of self-consistency, endowment effects, and all the other 150 or 180 heuristics that are on Wikipedia, and all the thousands of heuristics that are in science are taking place here. Very complex. Spaghetti science, confetti science, nightmare. Anyhow, but very relevant. The other final option is people are not very goal-driven, but you want to make them think consciously. This is more in, for example, in the health sector, or when people are thinking about a loan and you want them to think rationally, is this actually a wise choice? So, are you still with me? It's difficult to influence human behavior, but actually it's not. It's the fact that human behavior is very complex, and you have to understand the complexity, and then it actually becomes pretty easy. And this is where to start with. I'll give you one example. 3 years ago, I spoke on this same stage, and I got a new client. They're called Hostel World. Their mission is not to empower people to experience the world, but empower people to meet the world. Small difference. I thought Maxwell. So meet the world, right? Hostel World, big competitor of Booking.com, but they service millennials, mainly millennials, booking a bed in a dorm, right? Cheap, but getting better and better. It's not as shabby as this scene used to be. And we found out when we analyzed the data on mobile that people were very goal-directed, right? We saw a lot of bookings in the morning. We saw ideal funnels. We saw lead time of 1 or 2 days, so right time when they do the booking and when they're actually going to sleep there, so the same night or the night after. We saw a lot of very goal-directed behavior. So we looked at the mobile platform and we thought, let's make it more easy and keep them motivated. Very simple. This is their search page, it's the landing page. For example, hostels in Dublin. These are the hostels that they show. And we thought, there's a huge hero shot there. Nice picture, nice emotion, but not functional, right? Doesn't make it more easy. You see less of the hotels. Let's test if it helps if you take it away. And yes, it won. There were testimonials on the website. Does it help to have a testimonial there? We thought probably not, because testimonials are very much on the heuristics and biases. Can be distracting, are taking space. Probably they want more functional information. Let's test it. Better off when it's not there. And so you keep experimenting, and after like 150 experiments, we were pretty sure that on mobile, these users are very goal-directed. And it's not that illogical. If you think they usually use their mobile when they're already backpacking, they're already in this city, and they just know they need a bed for the same night. Maybe another backpacker told them, this is a nice hostel, you have to go there. It's goal-driven, right? System 2. We also saw in the data that on desktop and laptop, it's completely the opposite. Average lead time is more than 2 weeks, right? Ideal funnel, no way. They were all over the place, clicking everywhere, especially when they entered from social advertising, etc., or from one of their blogs or Facebook groups. And we thought, like, oh, wait a minute, probably it's all counter-effective what we're doing on mobile. So we ran the experiments on both platforms, and guess what? It was still a winner on mobile, but as we predicted, the winner on desktop was actually the other way around. Right? Remember the test with the testimonials, it's no good when people are system 2 driven, but it's very good if people are system 1 driven, or only system 1 driven. And I think the importance of these findings is not that one is a bit more than the other. No, the importance is that it's completely opposite. Right? So your unconsciousness can do a trillion things at a time, where your consciousness can only do one thing at a time. Your unconsciousness is helped by hundreds of heuristics, where your consciousness just wants it very easy and focused and needs attention in order to operate. So these are sort of 180 degrees differently operating systems. Of course, it's not the device. Right? There are more indicators, and nowadays we use 5 indicators to have a segment on system 1 and system 2 driven people. But I think it's a nice and elegant example, because this is a conference on mobile, and this is typically something where mobile was very predictive of the type of behavior. Right. I have 2 more minutes, and I want to say 2 more things, because this is just a start. Right? System 1 and System 2 thinking is all right. I mean, it'll get you a lot more revenue if you start applying it, but it's not so simple that, right? If you know how these 2 systems operate, then you know how you can change behavior, because behavior is very complex in the way that it's influenced, and that's partly or slightly because we personally differ. Right? So you and I have personality differences, but that tends to be slightly more or slightly less, right? Neurotic people are maybe a bit more conventional, don't try so many new things. Open and extrovert people try a lot of new things, but those tend to be very small differences. Even our experience in the past is a small predictor of the actual behavior. We call this the fundamental attribution error, and we call it fundamental for a reason. We people tend to forget about this system, but we tend to think that our personal factors are driving our behavior. I did this because I'm like that. Right? That's who I am. And it makes sort of sense, because we want to be unique. We want to be perceived as a unique person. And you are unique, but not so much as you might hope. The thing is, what is most determining behavior is the situation itself. And again, this is not slightly more, slightly better. This can be sort of the total opposite again. And I don't have time to get into, but the context, right? Is somebody asked to do this, or is he just in the train entering our platform because of a banner? Very different context. How does he feel? If we feel sad, we're very conservative. We'll stick to the same platforms that we're used to. If we're happy, we might try out more new things. The environment, if there are others around, or then we tend to be more socially desirable in terms of behavior. Sun shining, we try new things if the sun shines. If the sun doesn't shine, we're very different. These situational factors are way more important. And the funny thing is, and it's been said in the beginning, this all becomes measurable. Right? Andre was talking about wearables. Wearables can more and more tell us about your emotion, because we can measure your heartbeat, galvanic skin response, etc. IoT will tell us more and more about the environment and the context you're in. There's more and more data, but we have to add in this contextual, situational data, and then start personalizing, because personalization tends to be on this side, Behavioral science would tell you, focus on this side, focus on the situation. And mobile is the first device where we have more information on actually the situation. Small insight on this experiment with the testimonials. When we reanalyze the experiments, right, always keep your raw data because you can reanalyze experiments with new hypotheses and run it as a new experiment. We found out that actually it's not the device, but what is very predictive, way more predictive, is are people on 3 or 4G or on Wi-Fi? And turns out one of the reasons that these testimonials didn't work on 3 or 4G is that there are more people around already, because you're probably outside. On Wi-Fi, you're more at home on your own. So there's no social influence, and it actually helps the social influence there. That's all I wanted to mention about. Forget about psychology, but first get your data right, get your own skills up, and get your board level on board, thinking about regret. Then start adding intelligence to it, and grow your own intelligence as well, right? Because all the experiments will bring you first-party customer intelligence. There's no scientist that will actually no professor can tell Booking.com how their users are making decisions because they know better than them. But in the end, work on a consumer decision model that will bring new insights on not to do the same thing better, but to do the same need and enlighten customers with something completely different. Right? This we call first-order learning, second-order learning. And then we get to a point where we actually are able and have more knowledge on human behavior and how to influence it than the users actually have themselves. Because the user is still a system too. A voice in their head that thinks that he knows why he's behaving the way he is. You are now knowing more about why he's behaving the way he is because of the situation, maybe personality factors, and he's not aware of that. And with this intelligence, right, with this knowledge, comes a huge ethical responsibility. Because as much as I want you to focus on evidence, right, evidence everything, be like Booking.com, the thing with evidence is it's evidence for growing your company, right? It's your interest. It's the company's interest. There's somebody else as well, right? You call it a unique user. I call it a dual processing system. But their interests should be served as well. So I have a strong emphasis on people, please, not only analyze your experiment on the evidence that it's growing your company, but also that it's in the interest and benefit of your user. If you're interested in checklist and how we do that, approach me during drinks. We have an ethical checklist, very easy, 6 simple questions. But it's important because if I think about my kids and if I think about their future, right, their health, wealth, and happiness, then I'm getting really scared if we would all run our experiments only based on our primary goal, which is business value. And we forget that these people are so vulnerable and so in the illusion of knowing what drives their growth, that I think we should help them as well and do 2 things. Take care that you're not putting live experiments that are hurting the customer, and also share your knowledge, especially with science, governments, education, so that these people will learn more about their own behavior as well. Thank you.